What's up, guys? This is Ray, and today we talk about the 1966 Japanese movie The Sword of Doom, directed by Okamoto Kihachi and starring Nakadai Tatsuya. And this movie review is actually brought to you by Johnny Picaranta over at Patreon. He's one of my patrons over there who requested that I review Sword of Doom to discuss with you guys. So thank you, Johnny, for recommending another great movie this month for me to discuss with you guys today. So The Sword of Doom. Before I dive into this review, I just want to tell a little story. Actually finding this version, because in Japan was a bit difficult, because usually the way I watch movies is if I don't watch it in the movie theater, I usually check it out on Netflix or Hulu or even Amazon Prime Video. If I can't find it there, I'll just go to the rental store to find it. But I went to a few rental stores near my area, and the only ones that they had were like remakes. I think I found like a three-part adaptation of this movie, and I think there might have been another one-shot adaptation. I can't remember, but all I know is that all the versions I could find were not the ones directed by Okamoto. Now, Joni had specifically requested I review the Okamoto version for you guys, and I'm glad he did, because I eventually found it, and man, it was my first time watching it. I gotta say, I was blown away. So The Sword of Doom, with the Japanese name of this movie, it's actually called Dai Bosatsu Toge, which roughly translates to the Great Bodhisattva Pass, which is a mountain pass that you get to visit in the beginning of the story. That's where we meet our main character and some of the characters that play predominant roles throughout the story. And our main character, his name is Tatsuya Ryunosuke, and he is, as what Wikipedia describes it as to be, an immoral samurai. He's not a very good dude. He walks around almost showing no emotion at all. And he is a frightening, skillful swordsman. When you first meet him, he actually murders an old hermit on the pass. And as coincidences would have it, this hermit was actually praying for death at the statue, and by coincidence, Tatsuya just happened to be passing by, and he delivered the killing blow. But right from the get-go, when you meet Tatsuya Ryunosuke, you know he's not a good person. And then, moments later, he's in this fencing match, and he's urged by a few others, as well as the wife of his opponent, to throw the match, because there would be huge ramifications for his opponent's family if the opponent doesn't win. And so Ryunosuke is about to do it, but before he does that, he coerces the wife of his opponent to sleep with him, aka he kind of rapes her. So yeah, another minus check mark, if you will. But, he was about to throw the match, but then in an act of sudden self-defense, he actually kills his opponent. This leads to his exile, so he has to move locations, and the wife, or rather ex-wife of his opponent, who actually, they had divorced prior to the match because the opponent had found out about their affair. She comes along with him. And so we fast forward 2 years later. Ryunosuke isn't exactly the same swordsman as he was a couple years prior. He's drunk off of sake most of the time at home. He kind of abuses his wife and neglects his son. Well, his now wife, basically the ex-wife of his opponent has now just joined him in their household as his wife. And he does odd jobs for the Shinsengumi, which is kind of like this police force back in the day. But basically, he's a hired hitman, if you will. But his past slowly catches up to him as he gets introduced to the existence of Hyoma, who is the brother of his opponent in the fencing match. But anyways, there's a whole lot of things when it comes to story that come after that, but I'm going to leave the synopsis right there. And when it comes to the positives of The Sword of Doom, Nakadai Tatsuya, he is one of the great Japanese actors of all time, basically, and he really delivers an excellent performance in The Sword of Doom. Even though his character is, by all definitions, an emotionless, kind of amoral swordsman, the way Nakadai delivers, it's still very chilling to see this kind of character put on screen as a protagonist, if you will. I think normally any character with this kind of background, with the kind of MO that Ryunosuke has, would basically be the villain and the antagonist of the story. And then we get introduced to Hyoma, who kind of is by all intents and purposes of the story, the antagonist. But, he's actually the good guy in the story. So I think it's pretty interesting to have the villain at the forefront of this story. And when it comes to the action that's displayed in this movie, it's definitely nothing like the kind of high-octane sword fights you would get in contemporary cinema. No. It's more of the classic style of chambara, of jidaigeki, of classic samurai sword fighting stories. But more than just saying that, you get to feel authenticity in the choreography. You see Nakadai perform with his footwork and the way he holds his sword. Just everything just feels quite authentic. And not only that, but you get a lot of long takes of them just kind of sizing up their opponent, and it's very tense. Something I really like about these movies. It's very tense. It's also very quiet. Little to no music is performed. It's just you just see the two swordsmen getting ready with their poses, with their stances, and just waiting for their opponent to make the first move. And when it comes to the slicing and dicing, it can get pretty violent. You do see limbs getting chopped off. You do see blood getting splattered everywhere. So if you're in a bloodthirsty mood, this definitely has a lot of scenes to quench that thirst, if you will. This movie also features Mifune Toshiro in a supporting role. He plays the teacher of this fencing school, of which Ryunosuke initially challenges, and whom Hyoma, the brother of the murdered opponent, belongs to. And I also think the way this story progresses is quite interesting. You would think the way the story would progress would be that of a revenge story. Hyoma is trying to get revenge for the murder of his brother by the hands of Ryunosuke. But it's definitely a lot more than that. It kind of becomes more of a psychological story, if you will. There comes a point in the story where Ryunosuke kind of his confidence in himself gets shaken up just by seeing Mifune's character in action. And it starts in one scene in the snowstorm and a lot of bodies, and it's a great scene if you want some bloody action too. But from that scene on, it progressively gets crazier and crazier with the way, with Ryunosuke's insanity. And I think it accumulates to the very final act. I don't want to say much of what happens, but they do a lot of pretty interesting tactics, technical wise, when it comes to shadows and puppetry. And I think to see it on screen, just the way everything was captured on camera, it was a pretty amazing final act. When it comes to the negatives of The Sword of Doom, as with a lot of reviews of this movie, I do feel like the ending was very abrupt, and I didn't like the ending. I was looking at the timestamps, like, is there really like 30 seconds left in the story? He's just in the middle of something right now, and then it just abruptly ends with, I didn't like it because what it does, it leaves a lot of plot threads, a lot of character development, just kind of left hanging. You get introduced to like a handful of other characters who have their own stories going with Ryunosuke's story. Some of them tied directly to Ryunosuke's development. However, that all just gets thrown out the window with this abrupt ending. You really don't get any kind of closure with those characters. The story just ends. But overall, what do I have to say about The Sword of Doom? It is definitely a movie to watch. If you like classic style of samurai stories, you definitely got to check this out. Save for the ending, everything else leading up to the ending was fantastic. And as I mentioned previously, the two things I found the most intriguing about the story is that, one, you get kind of a typical, or at least a character who's typically portrayed as the villain as a forefront of this movie. He gets put into the story as the protagonist, if you will. And also how the way the story progresses into that of a psychological thriller. And it definitely has its own share of slicing and dicing and flailing body parts and cut limbs if you're a fan of that style of samurai action. But yes, those are my thoughts on The Sword of Doom. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you once again to Johnny, who recommended for me to watch Sword of Doom over at Patreon. For the rest of you, appreciate if you like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on all the social media channels. And yeah, that's about it for me, guys. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to my patrons over at Patreon for help keeping this channel afloat. And I'll see you all again in the next video. Take it easy.